Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream. Rudy's Revelation, finding revelation in the news and meeting in media. Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Right, so I have 34 headlines to get through. The European Union prepares for World War III. And with the recent spat of killings, what is the catalyst here? Why is this happening? Is it being used for an oppressive and divisive purpose? I believe it is. We're going to get into that as well. So without any further ado, let's read the news. We're going to start out here with Zero Hedge. Europe is about to commit financial self-immolation, and its leaders know it. So what are they talking about here? Italy's decision to stand with Belgium against the confiscation of Russian sovereign assets is not a diplomatic footnote. It's a moment of clarity breaking through the fog of performative morality that has engulfed Brussels. Strip away and the slogans and truth is unavoidable. The seizure of Russian foreign reserves will not change the course of the war in Ukraine by a single inch. Goes on to say it is about whether sovereign property still exists in the Western financial system that has quietly replaced law with its cult-like obedience. That is why panic has entered the room. The European Commission wants to pretend that this is a clever workaround, a one-off, an emergency measure wrapped in illegal contortions. And moral posturing masquerading as hysteria, but finance does not function on intentions, rage, or narrative. It functions on precedent, trust, and enforceability. And once that trust is broken, it does not return. The modern global financial system rests on a single unglamorous principle that state, that means country, assets held in foreign jurisdictions are legally immune from political confiscation. So basically, it goes on to say, talk about the principle underlying what the European Union is doing to Russia, and therefore setting precedent and would have the ability to do to any other country that it deems violated some sort of law. Goes on to say the principle underwrites reserve currencies, correspondent banking, sovereign debt markets, and cross-border investment. It is why central banks, like Russia's, once accepted euros instead of bullion shipped under armed guard. It is why settlement systems like Euroclear exist at all. Once that rule is broken, capital does not debate. It represses risk instantly, and then it leaves. Confiscation sends a message to every country outside the Western political orbit. Your savings are not safe. Your savings are safe, only as long as you remain politically compliant. So this can go not just with a military incursion, like with Russia, but with anything else. That is not a rules-based order. The article goes on to say, it is a selectively enforced order whose rules change the moment compliance ends. What we have is a compliance cartel enforcing law upward and punishment downward, depending on who obeys and who resists. What they're talking about here is the modus operandi of the New World Order. What will happen with global governance in its oppressive and authoritarian nature, this will apply to states as much as it will apply to people. That there is no sovereignty, that your wealth could be seized at any moment, particularly if you do not comply. So they're going to use finance enforcement or financial penalties, et cetera, as a way to comply. It's not different in modern civil suits where if you can't get a criminal conviction, that you'll go ahead and impose some sort of a civil financial penalty. So let's take, for instance, Trump's civil suit from, what's her name? Jean Carroll, the woman author who claimed many years or decades ago Trump raped her in a department store dressing room, which is unbelievable to begin with. But in any case, she punished him with a civil award, a monetary award, because there's no way he could have gotten punished in a criminal court because there wasn't any evidence. So she just made something up out of whole cloth to sully Trump's name, again, with the assistance of left-wing or liberal law teams, to sully Trump, but also get a monetary award. Same thing Europe is doing against Russia. The point being here is that everybody's going along with it. And if you saw with Hungary didn't want to go along with this kind of penalty against Russia, and it's not all state funds. These are also personal funds of people that Europe decides are connected with the Putin administration regime, whatever you want to call it. So this is an act of war, obviously. So sanctions is one thing. Countries and states can look at it as sanctions as an act of war, but certainly monetary confiscation, whether you do it to Iran or Russia, they would never dare do it to China, would have the same and equal result. Those states would look at it as an act of war. The second article from Zero Hedge I wanted to get to is Britain's new spy chief warns of aggressive, expansionist, and revisionist Russia. So as I spoke earlier before about how the Western intelligence agencies, effectively known or affectionately known as the Club of Bern, work together to create the conditions for change. So change is a hard thing, especially political change or any sort of realistic political change, a meaningful political change is very hard to do because the powers that be, if they want things the way they are, they're going to entrench themselves and resist any sort of change. Consider the status quo. But now we are in a state of flux where the powers that be, the establishment, they want change. They're pushing for catastrophic change, which is progressive change, technologically and any other way, every other way. Progressive change globally and certainly politically. And as I talk about often, is they want to get rid of sovereignty. So whether you believe in personal or individual sovereignty, certainly we believe in this country, individual liberty. However, the things like state sovereignty are also being threatened. You can see with the border, waves of border immigration, incursion, etc., flooding the country with non-assimilating groups that will weaken the state from inside. I mean, they don't have to take it over, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. It's anybody that could be an agent of change, or any group. And so the intelligence agencies use this group, or groups, wittingly or usually unwittingly, because it's easier to manipulate a group if they're believing in an ideal and you just use that ideal to manipulate them. Mind control. That's why it's not good to be an ideologue, because then that ideology can be used to manipulate you. Gabish? Okay, so Britain's new intelligence chief warned on December 15th, that was just yesterday, that the UK is operating in an era when the front line is everywhere. Now, this is the point I want to get to. It's a woman has set out an assessment of global threats, described Russia as an aggressive, expansionist, revisionist power determined to export instability across Europe and beyond. That's really bullshit. They always have. All strong state powers have intelligence assets all over the globe doing things, whether they're sowing chaos or expansionist, revisionist, whatever, export instability. They wanted stability, but the problem is they understand what Europe, particularly the West, was trying to do, was to close the noose, the stranglehold around Russia, eventually forcing a regime change and opening up the natural resources to the global market, and not controlled by, certainly, an unfriendly state. Okay, so that kind of sets the scene, because I want to be clear that it's not just the CIA, but the global intelligence network that are agencies, the agent of change in the world for the elite. If you think intelligence agencies are really, whether it's the FBI, are really run by the government, or the executive branch, the administration, whatever, you're wrong. There could be certainly some sway over things are done, but these intelligence agencies, particularly the United States, are very large, and like the CIA, most of it is covert. It's opaque. Even there are siloed operations going on that are even opaque to the director. So they're on a need-to-know basis for national security. So what I'm speculating or surmising is that these recent killings and or other events are being used to shape or to prepare the ground for the next upheaval. People have talked about civil war, but they don't really understand what it means. It's not. Civil war is coming because the two divisive camps in the United States can't agree politically. This fertile ground has been tilled for decades now, preparing for this inevitability. Now, I hope we don't have a civil war. I don't want to have a civil war, but the left are being driven to the point where you're going to have attacks, and it's going to force the people that aren't with the left into a defensive posture. So they've been trying to coax people on the conservative side of the aisle politically to lash out, and they haven't really been successful. They've had to sort of set up a certain events that could or couldn't be characterized completely on the right. But the mind virus they planted on the left is starting to produce fruit. Purposefully or not purposefully, I believe purposefully, because the people that are deranged people on the left are chomping at the bit wanting to take action. They're waiting for their handlers to let go of their leashes, and in some instances they have. It's not about stopping crime or criminal behavior. It's about controlling it. Okay. So to prove my point, first off, to describe this fertile ground. Before I go any further, I just want to ask you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. or so. Live stream, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, BitChute. All right, let's move on. One American News, FBI halts coordinated bombing plot by far-left extremist group in LA. The FBI halted a terrorist threat over the weekend, arresting 4 members of a radical anti-government group accused of planning bombings across Los Angeles. The far-left pro-Palestine anti-capitalist group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front reportedly planned coordinated attacks targeting 5 unidentified companies' logistics centers across Los Angeles County. Turtle Island Liberation Front. I mean, do these people come up with this? Is this a setup by the FBI? Because I believe clandestine operations in the FBI are still existing right under the nose of Kash Patel, or whether he's complicit in this or not. But all right, so anyway, these progressives were also planning to target U.S. immigration and customs enforcement agents and vehicles. That's convenient. But whether these people are controlled or not controlled, we don't really know. It sort of goes down the line of Candace Owens with the Charlie Kirk assassination. You only know what you know. So correlation is not causation. So 4 individuals, Audrey Eileen Carroll, 30, Zachary Aaron Page, 32, Dante Gaffield, 24, and Tina Lay, 41, have been charged with a conspiracy and possession of an unregistered destructive device. All 4 individuals will make an appearance in Los Angeles federal court on Monday. Yesterday, their arrest took place in Lucerne Valley, where they were believed to be testing explosive devices ahead of the attack at a campsite in the Mojave Desert. And I think I have another article from the New York Post that I'm going to get to in just a second, if I may. There they are. There are these. So these lunatics also went by crazy nicknames, which is kind of weird. Far-left extremists who allegedly planned LA New Year's Eve terror attack also wanted to take out ICE agents. Nicknamed members of a group known as the Order of the Black Lotus, a splinter group of the anti-capitalist Turtle Island Liberation Front, planned to plant pipe bombs at 2 U.S. companies in Los Angeles. The operation, dubbed Operation Midnight Sun, consisted of planting backpacks stuffed with bombs at 2 companies. According to the handwritten plan discovered by investigators, 4 suspects, Audrey Carroll, as I mentioned before, who is also known as a Signac and Black Moon. Zachary Page also went by Ash Kerrigan, A.K., and Cthulhu's daughter, and Dante Gaffield, known as Cedar or Nomad, and Tina Lay, 41, also known as Kickware. The search warrants also found signs declaring death to America, death to ICE, long live Turtle Island and Palestine. So if you don't know what Turtle Island is, supposedly that's the Native American name for the United States or North America. And then, as I said previously, the suspects were busted in Lucerne Valley in the Mojave Desert, where they were caught on video trying to detonate improvised explosive devices. So, so you have this. So the leftists are obviously on a tear. How they were allowed to get to that point, or even in the case of Tyler Robinson, how was he allowed to get on campus, to get up on a roof with a rifle and take take a shot at Charlie Kirk, obviously succeed in assassinating him. And if you didn't see, there was cell phone footage of Charlie Kirk. Excuse me, there's cell phone footage of the guy on the roof uh, preparing to take his pictures, his shots, excuse me. All right, moving on to the other. So that was just the tip of the iceberg. So you have leftist groups, obviously all over the place, allowed to become anti-governmental, prepare attacks, et cetera, probably under the Biden administration, and to take a foothold in California, to start a civil war, because that's what it's going to come to. It started with Luigi Mangione. He was a poster boy, and it's continuing. The people think it's okay to take human life if you're fighting Donald Trump or anybody they see as a fascist. It's propaganda. Okay, the next one. Rhode Island authorities seek public's help as Brown University shooter still at large. All right, if you didn't see the footage, I should start getting clips and just show you. It's a fat, first of all, like the DC pipe bomber, you don't have anything with all the cameras at Brown University. You don't have one shot that shows the face a little more clearly. The footage seemed to show that this very fat white person had a ponytail. Not sure if it was a woman or not, but they waddled around campus, I guess, before doing this. If this is if this is even the person. Now, you mean to tell me you have college buildings where there's no cameras in the hallways or no cameras in the building whatsoever? The president of Brown University couldn't even tell the media what class the gunman burst into. And so we know it's targeted now. There's no going around it. But just by the look of this person, if this person is the shooter, it's a fat, homely person waddling around, staking out the joint, purportedly. If this is the person, obviously a leftist. Now, this could not be the person. This could be a patsy. And there was a real assassin that came in and shot up the place. Apparently, well, let's get to the article. The police chief said the suspect used a 9mm handgun and fired several rounds, 40 actually, during the shooting. He said the motive for the shooting wasn't immediately clear, and he declined to say if any of the victims were targeted by the shooter. They didn't say anything. And the problem is now with the crowdsourced ability to solve crime, that investigators release very little information. He goes on to say, what I can tell you is that they individually definitely targeted Brown University. I can also tell you that that obviously it's something that we're looking into if there was anything else that he was targeting, but it's all open. So he's referring to the subject as a he. How does he know that? It's not clear. It seems like a fat Caucasian person, if that indeed was the person. They didn't show them even near the building. It was just outside the building on the street corner. They have no other surveillance, or they're trying to suggest that this person had advanced knowledge enough to evade surveillance. How did the person know about the surveillance? Did they case the joint earlier? There's a lot and then there seemed to be a standout because there wasn't a strong police response for up to a half an hour after the shooting started. Apparently, the target was the vocal vice president of the Republicans at Brown University. The other victim was an Uzbek student that didn't seem to have any worthy note to be targeted. All right, so you have this. I say it's a leftist, very much like Tyler Robinson. The question is about Tyler Robinson. It's not whether he did or he didn't do it. Is whether or not he was influenced or manipulated into doing it by others and who those others were. So it's just like this shooter at Brown University. If it is a leftist shooter, were they targeting the vice president of the Republican Club, and were they influenced or urged to do so by others? Because you could have online friends and you don't even know their true identity. They could be sock puppets. They could fucking be AI. And they'd say, I'm your friend, you little fat loser. Let's go shoot up Brown University. Here's your target. Okay, I'll meet you afterwards for ice cream. Who knows? Same goes with what happened at Bondi Beach. I guess it's Bondi Beach, not Bondi Beach. It's Bondi. Australia responds to Bondi Beach massacre of Jews with more gun laws that don't stop shootings. Brings me to my next point here, which is the fact that these things are used as a catalyst for other things, for the Civil War in the U.S. and for Australia. They already have one of the strictest gun laws of any Western country. Oh, you can have guns, they just have to be bolt action or shotgun, and we only give them to rural farmers. But this guy, the son, was on an ISIS watch list, and he was living with his father who had guns, and again, there seemed to be a stand down. The police response was weak and feckless, and it actually took another Muslim to take down one of the shooters. And if you see the whole video, he shoots one of the attackers with his own rifle. But they say he was killed by police. So what? This guy shot him, and then he wandered off and then was shot by police when he was unarmed? So we're not even getting the straight story here. If his gun was taken away, why was he shot by police? Going back to the story, following Sunday's mass murder at Sydney's Bondi Beach, has been characterized by law enforcement as an anti-Semitic attack. Australia's national cabinet is set to impose even stricter gun laws, ultimately increasing so-called soft targets in a nation with some of the most restrictive gun laws in the world, as I just said. Gun-free zones obviously don't work, didn't work in Australia. They didn't work at Brown University. They don't work virtually everywhere. An armed society is a polite society. And criminals don't obey gun laws or terrorists. So across the board, what we're seeing is the need for a Second Amendment, especially the Bruin decision from the Supreme Court, to be upheld, according to the National Rifle Association. So in any case, what we saw here was the fact that excuse me, I'm just looking for something. That the Prime Minister of Australia, I had another text for that. I was going to show you the quote. The Prime Minister for Australia actually said that we're worried about extremist activity and Obviously, we're worried about right-wing extremism and white supremacy and all this crap. There's nothing to do. This is an Islamic attack, and they're totally giving you misdirection and saying, forget about the Islamic attack, where apparently the community of Jews in Australia, or Sydney at the very least, have been saying for some time that we've been getting threats, there's been vandalism, you got to do something. And they didn't do anything. And more than likely, since this guy was already on, the son was already on the radar of Australian intelligence, they just let it happen on purpose. And it gives us an excuse, like Britain, to just take away all the guns. And go after right-wing extremism. I told you yesterday about that guy. I should have looked it up. The guy in some rural part of Australia, the government went in, and because he had a lot of guns, the government went in and just shot him to death. He didn't even do anything. But here we have Muslims with guns, and the son, obviously radicalized. According to, they were told he was, radicalized by ISIS, which is just the CIA. This is modern day, shock troops, pirates, whatever you want to call them, buccaneers, going around the world, cutting people's heads off. That's what the Muslim extremists are being used for. And unfortunately, in Saudi Arabia, they don't have the Saudis' help anymore ever since MBS got in there, thanks to Trump. And he said, we're not going to export Wahhabism anymore and not export the radicals. So now most of the radicals are coming out of Pakistan or Afghanistan, etc. All right, more death and destruction. So let's move on to Rob Reiner. So the New York Post has the headline, Rob Reiner feared son Nick's mental health was deteriorating before grisly slashings, according to a family friend. We all know about the double homicide where they were stabbed to death and their throats slashed, which indicates that it has to be some sort of emotion involved. Because if you just want to kill someone, you could slash their throats and no one will know the difference. But if you're an intelligence assassin, you'd know to do both, right? Why would you stab them to death and then slash their throats? It doesn't make much sense. And as we know, slashing the throat is tied to mob killings and or intelligence killing as well. So they were stabbed and had their throats slit. So their long-running nightmare driven by their son Nick Reiner's mental illness and addiction. Now just listen to me here. Nick was thought to be using drugs, and his parents feared for his mental state over the past few months. Family friend who knew Nick his entire life told the Post, Rob had been telling people that they were scared for Nick and scared for his mental state was deteriorating. These poor people, well, they're not really poor, did everything to help this kid. So they weren't poor. They had means. So what do you think everything to help this kid who had a deteriorating mental state and had mental illness, what do you think they would do for him? Maybe send him to a doctor? What do you think the doctor would do? Because I looked up SSRIs yesterday. They subscribe it for everything. Not just depression, bipolar disorder, and autism. Everything. Nervousness. In any case, it goes on to say Nick has been troubled mentally for his entire life, and they have tried everything, SSRIs, to try and help him and have been unable to. So, all right, let's just go under the presumption he was on SSRIs, because what would drive you to kill your parents in such a way? Even if you were fucked up on, and that's going to be the take. At least James Wood on Jesse last night, Jesse Waters, primetime on Fox. James Woods even said, what kind of pharmaceuticals was he on? Because I don't care what you say. If you've never lived in drug culture before, illicit drugs don't drive you to commit murder. That's the pharmaceuticals' claim to fame. I don't even care if you're tweaked out on friggin' meth. You're not going to commit murder. You could, but it's not the drug that's driving you to do that. SSRIs drive suicidal and homicidal ideation in about 2 to 4% of those who take it. So let's say there are 100,000 people out there on SSRIs, probably a lot more. That's 2 to 4,000 ticking time bombs out there. What do you think? Obviously, Nick Reiner could be one of them. My question is, let's go on the presumption that he was on SSRIs. Was there anything else that could have been a catalyst to get him to kill his parents? Maybe ChatGPT told him to do it. Maybe an online sock puppet told him to do it. Who knows? Maybe ISIS told him to do it. All right, moving on. The Associated Press, Trump sues BBC for $10 billion, accusing it of defamation over editing president's January 6th speech. We knew this was coming. He said he was going to do it. Good. The BBC is state broadcasting, sponsored by government tax dollars, British tax dollars. It is state propaganda against Trump. Unconscionable. It's not like you have a private company that they can really do whatever the fuck they want to do, and they decide to do this. And of course, it could be held against them, and then, let the viewers decide or the patrons decide whether they want to support such an outfit. But the BBC is sponsored by the state, which makes it much more troubling. It's the same reason that people have a problem with NPR, because it's state sponsored. It gets funding. It gets private funding, donations, but it also gets state funding. That's why it's considered public broadcasting. Is it? It's an issue. And for them to outwardly go against a certain political party or a certain political movement or a president or what have you, and that's why they stopped giving state funding, federal funding to NPR. You are in a web of delusion because of the propaganda, lies, psychological manipulation that you and me are under 24/7. You wonder why people are deluded is because they're not aware of the capacity that media has to delude you. So you have to understand that to be able to put up a resistance toward it. PJ Media has the headline. Stay with me now. Trump designates illicit fentanyl weapon of mass destruction. So if you don't know anything about the Opium Wars, it's basically how the British took over China, that even way back when had close to 1 billion people. was the British farmed opium in Afghanistan and they shipped it into China, hooking the whole population on opium. And then the British just kind of sailed in and took Hong Kong and really all the ports of China, Peking, etc., and ruled it for 100 years, more than that. So in any case, fentanyl and to some extent cocaine and heroin, etc., have been used as the new opium war against the West. It was cocaine for a long period of time, and all the communists joined into this fun, including the CIA, shipping crack cocaine in the United States, etc., and using the proceeds to do other illicit and covert activity. But now it's fentanyl, and it's even deadlier. So, at some point, I'm sure there's a plan to get fentanyl into regular foodstuffs. I'm sure that's in the making. You don't know. But right now, they're killing over 100,000 Americans a year with fentanyl. And so that's why Trump wants to stop it. It's obviously, call it a weapon of mass destruction. It unleashes, if you designate it as that, it unleashes more investigatory and policing powers. It's like on the same thing as, I don't know, plutonium or something. Anthrax, ricin. National Review has the headline, "The Fed is already monetizing the national debt. Federal Reserve is slouching toward fiscal dominance, a condition where monetary policy is made subservient to fiscal policy to help service an unmanageable national debt, even at the expense of controlling inflation." And we're already here. Fiscal dominance usually refers to the manipulation of the interest rates to reduce the cost of servicing the national debt. You got to read this whole article. Just what I've been saying all the time is that they're on par to borrow another $6 trillion in the next 10 years. That's really going to put us over the edge. Like I said already, our national debt service is $1 trillion. I think it's bigger than any other expenditure. The military budget is $900 billion, so it's bigger than the military budget, Pentagon budget. That's why I'm a conservative, because people don't realize that they just keep printing money. And you try to get ahead, you keep going backwards financially. Why is that? Is because your dollar gets weaker year after year. The rate of inflation should be around 2 to 3%. That's when it's kept low. When people are irresponsible about printing money, like the Biden administration that spent $2 trillion they didn't even need to, the inflation starts to spiral out of control. And then you get, over the course of his administration, almost 23%. That's exactly, or close to 1/4 of your dollar has been reduced. The purchasing power of your dollar has been reduced by almost 25%. It's more like 23%. Everybody says 9%. I go, that was just at one period in the Biden administration. The compounded inflation over his term was about 23%. That's a lot. Because if you're compounding 9, even if it's by 3 or 4%, you get my drift. Or you're compounding 6% by 9%, etc. All right, just the news. Hillary Clinton's own Russia scandal. FBI memos detail how Uranium 1 probe thwarted. Federal investigators believe there was significant evidence worth pursuing related to possible criminality involving the Clinton Foundation, the State Department's approval of the sale of Uranium 1 to Russian state-owned interest, but delays by the Justice Department and the FBI led the inquiry to wither and die because of a statute of limitations issues. Of course, they're not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton. She's still part of the party politics. And it's really the parties that rule government, because the parties control party members within the government, and who controls the party. You don't even have to be in office like Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. You control the apparatus that controls the underlings. So if you're a Democratic operative within the State Department, you're still there. You know, you get a call from the DNC, hey, we need some information, or we need you to do this or that, and the other thing. The sale of the Canadian-based Uranium One to Russia state-owned Rosatom was the focus of great controversy and scrutiny from Republicans and others who argued that then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton helped approve the deal that the Clinton Foundation may have stood to benefit from. FBI agents and DOJ prosecutors in Little Rock, Arkansas, and elsewhere closely scrutinized the scandal, but were largely blocked from serious investigative action due to the leadership delays and, following those delays, arguments that the statute of limitations had expired. No one's above the law, so they say. Stay with me now, more from just the news. FBI to give Congress bombshell memos warning Biden DOJ didn't have probable cause to raid Trump home. The FBI had warned that the Justice Department under Biden did not have probable cause to raid President Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago, but prosecutors proceeded anyways. Look at this. Anyways. Who talks like that? That's a typo. But prosecutors proceeded anyway, not anyways. FBI's Washington field office does not believe they established probable cause. Of course not. It has long been rumored that some of the FBI agents disagreed with the decision to raid Trump's home to look for classified documents at the request of the National Archives. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Presidents, for some time, have been able to declassify and remove documents classified, previously classified and other, forever. Okay, underlings, vice presidents, senators aren't allowed to do that. The president does have the ability to do so. That's why the FBI agents didn't do it. The soon-to-be-released emails will chronicle the specific concerns that DOJ under President Joe Biden had not met the standard, for a search warrant. Indeed, you have to have probable cause. 2 federal indictments against Trump that were ultimately dismissed in what Republicans argued were politically weaponized acts by the Democrat-run DOJ designed to influence the 2024 election. Indeed. To make them look bad. They pulled out all the stops because they can't have Trump. And the reason they can't have Trump is because the shit he's doing. And that is what's spurring on all these killings, sans Rob Reiner. I mean, that just looks like something else entirely, may not be. But the ISIS attacks and the leftist attacks, trying to sow chaos and fear, and everybody knows how that ends up. When you have fear to such a degree that people just get wiggy. You know, they don't know what to think, and they're all afraid. They don't want to go outside, and all, so they take all this chaos and fear, and then they go, well, what do you think they're going to say? It's Trump's fault. Of course they are. And so this is going to, and you even have pundits doing it already. It's Trump's fault because like Charlie Kirk's assassination was Trump's fault, because if it weren't for Trump's rhetoric, wouldn't have pissed off the left, and they wouldn't have tried to kill him and kill Charlie Kirk. And you even have people on the right saying this. Next up from Fox News, House GOP tensions erupt as Republicans turn on each other heading into year's end. House GOP frustrations are simmering ahead of a multi-week holiday break. Representative Michael McLeod from Texas. I'm always going to want to see more action. My job isn't to come here and be satisfied, without a doubt. But he said of House GOP leadership, when you're in charge, you get more blame and more praise than you probably deserve. But it's going to take the whole conference to come together. The whole conference to come together, remembering what brought us here. So that brings me to this. Vanity Fair. Now, you might have seen this already. Susie Wiles, J.D. Vance, and the Junkyard Dogs, the White House chief of staff on Trump's second term. Throughout the first year of Donald Trump's second administration, Vanity Fair writer Chris Whipple, you probably don't know this guy, but I do, has interviewed Wiles amid each moment of crisis. This insider's account joins a portfolio of portraits for an unflinching, up-close look at power and peril. And this is my problem here. Now, it makes it sound like Susie Wiles just sat down with this guy, Chris Whipple, for 11 hours and gave a big, long interview. That's not. He's called her 11 times. And during their phone conversations, or maybe they were in person, she said things. Now, apparently this was sanctioned by Trump, but it shouldn't have been. So right at a time where there are cracks appearing within the coalition, the conference, the GOP, out comes this article. And she says she never agreed with Trump on anything, but he's the boss and I got outvoted, blah, blah, blah. So she's painting herself in a better light like everybody does when they're interviews for articles and books. And it's just used by a leftist publication, again, to sow doubt in this new administration. It's less than a year still old. So I don't know who allowed for this. So what it says in the article, you might read some of it if you go check it out, is she calls J.D. Vance a conspiracy theorist for over a decade. You don't believe in conspiracy, but I do. Why? Because there are conspiracies. Things don't happen in a vacuum. The waves and waves of unchecked immigration into Europe were mirrored in the United States without the same sort of catalysts that Europe had. Europe was dealing with the Arab Spring, civil war in Syria, etc. So you had refugees from Middle East and Africa spilling into Europe. There was no such conflict in South America. These things were contrived and arranged to flood the Western nations full of immigrants that may or may not assimilate, just the burden of the social safety nets. Most of these countries, including the United States, have social safety nets that'll be burdened by extra tens of millions, or in Europe's cases, hundreds of millions of culturally disparate individuals. Which brings us to our next problem with the GOP. The Hill, senators brace for another possible shutdown in January. Senators of both parties are braced for another government shutdown next year. This is in January. Liberal Democrats in the Senate are fuming, according to The Hill, that Republicans blocked a proposal to extend the subsidies, which are due to expire in January, and were going to be renewed through 2028. Of course, you shouldn't get subsidies. There should be a different way to do it, because basically what happens, and there's another typo here in The Hill, The bipartisan talks to extend the subsidies foundered, not floundered. So it appears to me that not even the Hill copy edits. I mean, they might run spell check, but you really have to read what's on the page. If you're an editor, that is. So in any case, here's the point. Insurance companies are projected to charge people, this is what the Hill says, to buy their insurance through the Affordable Care Act marketplace 26% more if the enhanced subsidies expire in January. Now, you know this is the Hill because, again, they're another intelligence op. Insurance companies aren't to charge people 26% more. They're charging people what the price was minus the subsidy. So the insurance companies just aren't receiving the subsidy. So they're charging the people the full amount. So the misnomer that somehow Obamacare was going to make insurance cheaper, that wasn't, it was a giveaway to insurance companies. It just said, we're going to give insurance companies, people that didn't buy insurance companies, insurance before, health insurance before because they couldn't afford it, now we'll buy it for them. So the insurance companies will make more money because the government is paying for the people that can't afford it. I'm not saying that people shouldn't receive a modicum of things from the state if they're poor. But it has to be poor. You can't be poor and get the best medical care. It just doesn't work that way. Should you be getting life-saving treatment? I guess. But what's it going to cost? What's it going to cost the taxpayer? Because ultimately, that's who's going to pay. And then you're going to run it, socialized medicine, you run into the rationing of care, et cetera, et cetera. Just look at what's going on in Cuba right now. They can't even, they don't even have the doctors anymore. They're just misdiagnosing everything. All right, wanted to run into this. We're getting over a little bit here. This is from CNN. Inside the white supremacist compound, hiding in plain sight. Why is it hiding in plain sight? Because they want to be seen. A woman who spoke to CNN on the condition of anonymity due to fears for her safety. We had secret hiding places. We'd just be gone for hours. Our parents wouldn't even know we were there. Right. So here's a woman who we don't know. We can't check who she is because she's not giving her name. So this is all made out of whole cloth. Why is it made out of whole cloth? Because the woman is fearful of her new neighbors, a collection of white supremacists associated with the group Patriot Front. Now, if you know what Patriot Front is, it's the fucking FBI. These guys are not real white supremacists. First of all, they don't have any tattoos. So that was the giveaway. Also, the FBI doesn't hire you if you have tattoos. So you put those two things together, they all have their face masks and they're all wearing the same uniform and just looks stupid. This is made up out of whole cloth. Again, there are no white supremacists, maybe in Moscow, Idaho. But even that is speculative because, where you have white supremacists, you have domestic intelligence all over the fucking place. So how could you tell the two apart? You go to a white supremacist meeting and probably half the people in there are either assets or agents. Do they organize the group or are they just undercover? You get into that gray area, you don't know. Patriot Front is a bunch of shit. It's not real. And the fact that CNN is reporting it and trying to, because look at the Prime Minister of Australia. Oh, we have to counter white supremacists and far right extremists. Excuse me. You just got attacked by Islamicists. Your Jewish community did. What the fuck are you talking about? Right-wing. They're out there. Maybe there are people out in the rural parts of the United States or Australia who just want to be left alone and don't want to pay taxes. But they're not going to the beach to shoot Jews. Speaking of Muslim extremists, PJ Media, Mamdani is about to prove what his administration will be worse, that his administration will be worse than you thought. Why? Because he wants to appoint this guy, Ramzi Qassem, a lawyer who has defended al-Qaeda terrorist and a radical anti-Israel activist at Columbia, is the leading candidate for chief counsel. Qassem is already part of Mamdani's inner circle, serving as legal affairs advisor on the transition team. He also teaches law at the City University of New York, further underscoring the ideological extremism he tends to bring to City Hall. I'm not going to go into the rest of the article. He's tied to extremism, I guess. In any case, defending that point of view, we're supposed to be a melting pot. At least that's what we say when we invite people in. But then when they get here and they espouse divisive viewpoints, they're not asked to leave. So the Jews have the right, as much right to be here as the Muslims, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't call other people out. Or just like blacks have the same right to be here as whites or Hispanics or whatever, provided they're in the country legally. Just quickly, trial begins for judge charged with helping man evade immigration. Authorities, Justice Department says Hannah Dugan tried to help defendant avoid arrest, while her defense team says she was following courthouse policy. It's not courthouse policy to allow a defendant to exit through the judge's chambers and then exit the building through the secure area where they house the prosecutor's office, the judge's office, etc., and also some criminal defendants, to avoid federal authorities. That's obstruction. So that's what she's being charged with, I imagine. More on the Reiner murder. Hotel room Nick Reiner fled to after allegedly murdering parents was covered all in blood. So this is a fait accompli. That's just breaking this morning. I had to get it in there. So it's a fait accompli. The hotel room he went to after allegedly slicing the throats of his parents because he's mentally ill and probably on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, fled to a hotel room to clean up, and there was blood all over the hotel room. So I imagine it's going to come back as the blood of his parents, and so case closed. So it's sort of like Tyler Robinson, but Candace Owens doesn't want to believe it's Tyler Robinson, whatever. And we're going to get to that too in just a second if we have time. Next up, Reuters. Meta tolerates rampant ad fraud from China to safeguard billions in revenue. Reuters investigation reveals the owner of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp decided to accept fraudulent advertisement payments from China. Internal company documents show. So it's everybody's influenced by the Chinese. Either they're outwardly bribed or they're compromised or what have you. I mean, it's out of control that we're on a tipping point and we're tipping it back, which is good globally, because people are starting to resist socialism as a whole. So any nod to it in this country is crazy, foolish, laughable, cockamamie. All right. Getting to Erica Kirk now. Erica Kirk shares update after private in-person meeting with Candace Owens. Erica Kirk said she had a productive conversation with Candace Owens in the first direct conversation after Charlie Kirk's death. I didn't realize it was in person. That's what Fox says. There was a back and forth, whatever. I don't care. I don't care. This is stupid distraction. Is it not Tyler Robinson that shot Charlie Kirk? Then show me evidence that it was someone else. Right? Correlation is not causation. Okay, there are Egyptian planes following around Erica Kirk. Why? You know why? You don't know why? What does that have anything to do with it? Is it the Mossad? How do you know? What evidence do you have that it was a Mossad? Was there another shooter? You have no evidence. So whatever. Not saying that there isn't some weird behavior surrounding the investigation, surrounding TPUSA, and I find Erica Kirk sort of strange anyway, but correlation is not causation. It doesn't mean anything until you have evidence that it means something. Like, I don't know, like 3 skyscrapers in a city collapsing in their own footprint at free fall speed all on the same day. With evidence of demolition explosive materials in the rubble. All right. We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. Federalist Jimmy Lai's criminal conviction and what democracy dying in darkness actually looks like. On Monday, pro-democracy activist and media tycoon was convicted in the city's Chinese-backed government on charges of alleged collusion with foreign powers and sedition. Lai was charged with under Hong Kong's new 2018 national security law, which enacted several years ago, 2018, to further criminalize dissent through the semi-autonomous region now into the grip of the Chinese Communist Party and its forces. The sedition charge was under a separate colonial-era law. Why are these out of order? I'm sorry. Yeah, that's where I fucked up. Excuse me. Real Clear Politics. Jimmy Lai's family looks to Trump world leaders for help. Family members, friends of Jimmy Lai, a businessman and pro-democracy newspaper owner in Hong Kong, are holding out hope that he can still be released after his guilty verdict. Yeah, so he owned a newspaper in Hong Kong. Hong Kong used to be a vibrant, democratic enclave. It's an island off the communist Chinese coast. And the British gave it back to China, but said you have to allow it to stay autonomous until 2020, was it 2025 or 2030 or something like that. And during COVID, under COVID, that the Chinese communists just rolled in and took it. And this is what I was looking for before, was the Federalist. Australia doesn't have a gun problem as an Islamist problem, and there, yet within hours of the attack, Prime Minister Albanese proposed tougher gun laws and warned about right-wing extremist groups, as I talked about. I thought it was part of that, just a news article. It was actually the Federalist. I got some chiming in from Ronaldus Magnanimous on Rumble. He chimes in about Rob Reiner's death, and he's blaming it on the fact that Rob Reiner was a crazy liberal who blamed everyone but themselves for a mixed-up kid they failed as parents with. Of course. And then chimes in about the Uranium One, Russia's control over domestic uranium in exchange for donations. He says it's treason. I would agree, because she was still a Secretary of State. Why would there be a statute of limitations? Can't wait for the commie to finish the destruction of what now is the Big Apple, in reference to Mamdani's appointment, or soon to be appointed, chief counsel in Gracie Mansion, which will be this Islamicist. That's it for me today. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate you. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live at 10 a.m. on Rumble, YouTube, other platforms. Getter, Mine, Facebook, True Social, X, Substack. Yeah, I had to turn down my monitor there. So sorry if the music was a little loud. All right, join me tonight, episode 131 of Tuesdays with Perry. Hope to see you then. We go live about 9:15. Or join me tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel, 10 a.m. Live stream where we go over about 30 or more stories. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order